It happened the night before the trip. Suitcases lined up by the door, passports on the counter, the faint smell of her perfume still hanging in the hallway. That's when my mother-in-law turned to me, her voice cold, steady, almost rehearsed. "We don't need you on this trip. You're not coming." I stood there, one hand still gripping the handle of my carry-on. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard her. Maybe she was joking. Maybe my ears were still ringing from rushing around all day. But no one laughed. Not my husband, who stared at his shoes like they'd suddenly become fascinating. Not my sister-in-law, who smirked behind her coffee mug. Just silence. My chest tightened. My face burned like I'd stepped too close to the oven. It felt like the rug had been yanked out from under me. Except it wasn't just a rug. It was the entire floor. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation. Instead, I placed my suitcase down, straightened my back, and smiled. A small smile, the kind you use when you're swallowing something sharp. Inside, though, my thoughts raced. Wait, what about the villa I booked? The flights I paid for? The $2,000 that left my account so they could enjoy their perfect little family vacation? My pulse thudded in my ears, but my face gave away nothing. No one moved to stop me. My mother-in-law crossed her arms, satisfied, as if she had just won some invisible battle. My husband opened his mouth, then closed it again. He finally mumbled, "Maybe next time, next time," as if my absence was nothing more than forgetting to pack sunscreen. The air in that living room was heavy, thick, pressing on my shoulders. I could almost hear the ice in the water pitcher sweating on the counter. A family trip, a once-in-a-year getaway, and suddenly I was erased like I'd never been part of it at all. In that moment, something shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I simply said, "All right." Then I walked past them, my suitcase wheels clicking against the hardwood floor. My steps were steady, but my heart was a storm. And here's the thing. I don't think she expected that. I don't think she expected me to stay quiet. She wanted me to cry, to fight, to lose my dignity right there in her house. But I didn't. Instead, I let her believe she had won. Because the truth? I already had a plan. I didn't know then how quickly her words would backfire. I didn't know how fast her little performance would unravel. But I did know one thing, crystal clear. As I closed the door behind me, she had just made the biggest mistake. So I kept walking. Out into the night air, cool against my burning face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A reminder about the villa reservation. Under my name. The one they thought they could just take for granted. My hand tightened around it, and I smiled again. A different smile this time. And that's where I'll leave it for now. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say no one in that family looked at me the same way again. Stay with me, because when we come back, we'll return to the main character of this story, me, and you'll see exactly how one sentence from my mother-in-law turned into a turning point she never saw coming. The funny thing is, just a few hours before that moment, I thought everything was fine. I thought the trip was still ours. I had spent the morning double-checking travel details, packing snacks for the plane, and even picking up sunscreen because last year everyone forgot and ended up burned on day 2. I wasn't preparing for rejection. I was preparing for family. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and leftover coffee when I arrived. Suitcases were stacked neatly by the front door, shiny new luggage tags swinging from the handles. My mother-in-law's handwriting was on each one, bold and precise, like she wanted to make sure the world knew they belonged to her clan. The living room was bright but sterile. Lamps glowing against beige walls, the hum of the AC filling in the silence between conversations. My husband was on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he was hiding inside it. His sister perched on the armrest, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her cup, giving me that sideways glance that always carried just a little too much satisfaction. I walked in smiling, trying to keep things light. "So, everyone ready for the big trip?" I said, setting my bag down by the coat rack. My voice sounded cheerful, but inside I was tired, stretched thin from working extra shifts to cover the costs. They barely looked up. My sister-in-law laughed at something on her screen. My husband muttered something about the flight time. And then my mother-in-law appeared from the hallway, hair sprayed into its usual helmet shape, pearls shining against her sweater. She didn't smile. She didn't even pretend. Looking back, I can see the hints were there. The extra chair missing from the airport shuttle list she had emailed a week before. The way she brushed off my questions about hotel rooms with, "Oh, don't worry, we've got it covered." The fact that no one ever asked me about my packing or if I needed help. Small things, little cracks that I smoothed over in my head because I didn't want to believe what they meant. But in the moment, I ignored them. I told myself it was just disorganization, that she wasn't actually planning to exclude me. I mean, why would she? I'd paid for the villa. I'd covered part of the airfare. I had receipts for every single expense. Who throws out the person footing the bill? Still, my stomach twisted even before she spoke. Something about the way she folded her arms, blocking the hallway like a gatekeeper. The way my husband refused to meet my eyes. The way the whole room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something. That's when she dropped it. "We don't need you on this trip. You're not coming." The silence afterward was deafening. The clock ticked, the AC clicked, a car passed outside. Inside, nothing. Just the thud of my own heartbeat and the feeling that I'd been written out of a script everyone else had been rehearsing for weeks. I looked at my husband, hoping for something. A defense, a protest, a reminder that I mattered. But all I got was a weak shrug and that useless line, "Maybe next time." My sister-in-law smirked like Christmas had come early. The contrast cut me deeper than the words themselves. Hours earlier, I'd been imagining us together on the plane, laughing at the in-flight safety demo, maybe sharing a bag of pretzels. I'd pictured us unpacking in the villa, spreading out snacks on the counter, bickering over who got which bedroom. I thought this was going to be one of those rare, almost normal family moments. Instead, I was standing in a room where no one wanted me. Instead, I was being erased. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my voice calm. "All right," I said, setting my suitcase down gently like I was just adjusting the handle. The smile I gave her wasn't real, but it was steady, because I knew something she didn't. The villa reservation? It wasn't in her name, it was in mine. The airline tickets? All tied to my card. They thought they were cutting me out, but they were about to find out what it meant to depend on someone you treated like an afterthought. But for now, I kept quiet. For now, I let them believe they had succeeded. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon you can carry. And as I stood there, invisible in my own family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not even sadness. Clarity. Clarity that this wasn't just about one trip. It was about every birthday, every holiday, every gathering where I'd been sidelined, dismissed, or humiliated. It was about years of being useful, but never valued. About being the one who paid, cooked, cleaned, and organized, but never the one who truly belonged. I didn't say any of that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could feel their relief, like I had taken the tension with me. But really, I had just left them with something far worse. Because what they didn't know was that I wasn't walking away empty-handed. Stay with me, because this is where the story really begins. When we come back, we'll dive into the history, the years of quiet slights and buried insults that led me to this exact moment. And you'll see why this time, my silence was anything but defeat. This wasn't the first time my mother-in-law made me feel like an outsider, not even close. Her words that night, "You're not coming," were just the loudest version of what she'd been saying in 1,000 quieter ways for years. I can trace it back to our wedding. You'd think that would be a day of joy, a day where families come together. But for her, it was a stage, and I was competition she had no interest in losing to. She stood there in front of my relatives and announced, "Well, at least she found a dress that doesn't look too cheap." Everyone laughed nervously like it was just a joke. But my cheeks burned the entire ceremony. I swallowed it, because what else could I do? Call her out in front of 100 guests? Number? I smiled, pretended it was nothing, and walked down the aisle with her voice still echoing in my head. Then there was the Christmas after our first year of marriage. I had saved up to buy her a silver necklace I thought she'd love. Simple, elegant, something that would match her favorite sweaters. She opened it, smiled politely, and said thank you. The next week, I found the receipt in the trash she'd returned it. Used the money to buy a new handbag for her daughter. She didn't even hide it. When I asked about the necklace, she said, "Oh, it just wasn't my style. But Sarah needed a new purse, and family comes first." I nodded then too, but inside something twisted tighter. Birthdays were no better. My son's 5th birthday should have been a celebration. I'd planned the cake, the decorations, even a little treasure hunt in the backyard. But when the party started, she wheeled in her own cake. Bigger, fancier, and loudly declared, "This is the real cake. Children deserve the best." She cut into hers first, leaving mine to sit untouched until the end of the night. I watched my boy blow out candles on a cake I didn't choose, while everyone clapped and praised her thoughtfulness. I smiled for the pictures, but inside, I wanted to scream. It didn't stop there. Little things piled up like bricks on my back. She corrected the way I folded laundry in front of neighbors. She reminded me loudly that I only worked part-time when my kids were young, as if raising them didn't count. She told my husband more than once that he could have done better. Always with that same shrug, that same dismissive smile, like she wasn't being cruel, just honest. And through it all, I bit my tongue. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that keeping the peace was better for everyone. But peace at what cost? Each time I stayed quiet, each time I forced a smile, it chipped away at me. The family dinners were the worst. She had a way of seating me just slightly apart, a chair at the edge of the table instead of in the middle. When conversations started, I'd add something, and she'd redirect, as if my words didn't exist. One Thanksgiving, I made a pie pecan, my husband's favorite. She set it aside untouched and served the store-bought pumpkin she'd brought instead. By the end of the night, my pie was still wrapped in foil, forgotten. That was the first time I realized being part of her family didn't mean belonging. It meant enduring. And yet, I kept trying. Because that's what you do when you love someone. I loved my husband, loved our children, wanted us to be a family. I told myself if I just tried harder, if I cooked the meals she liked, if I bought the gifts she preferred, if I kept my head down, then maybe she'd let me in. Maybe she'd see me as more than the woman who married her son. But deep down, I think I always knew. Some doors don't open, no matter how many times you knock. And that's why, standing in her living room that night with my suitcase by my side, her words didn't break me. They revealed what had been true all along. She didn't want me there. Not at the trip. Not at the table. Not in the family photo she curated so carefully. And the only mistake I had been making was pretending otherwise. That realization didn't come all at once. It had been leaking in for years, like water through a crack in the ceiling. But that night, when she said it out loud, I finally stopped patching the leak. I let it pour through. And here's the part she never saw coming. All those years of me staying quiet, nodding, smiling, it wasn't weakness. It was patience. I was collecting every slight, every insult, every dismissal, and stacking them neatly in my mind. And when the time was right, when the balance tipped too far, I wasn't going to fight her on her terms. I was going to fight her on mine. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'll take you back into that living room, the sights, the sounds, the moment where everything snapped from quiet history into present-day action. And you'll see how silence can turn into the loudest answer of all. The living room felt colder after she said it. Maybe it was the air conditioning, maybe it was me. I stood with my suitcase by the door, her words still hanging in the air like smoke. "We don't need you on this trip. You're not coming." She didn't flinch. Her chin tilted slightly upward, pearls shining under the lamp like armor. My husband sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly, thumbs moving but eyes unfocused. My sister-in-law leaned back, smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. They were all waiting for my reaction. I didn't give them the one they wanted. I inhaled slowly, letting the lemon-scented cleaner burn my nose, grounding myself. The suitcase handle was slick in my palm from how tightly I was gripping it. My heartbeat was loud, steady, pounding in my ears, but my face stayed calm. "All right," I said softly, just that one word. Her brows twitched, just slightly, like she wasn't expecting me to fold so quickly. She wanted tears, a fight, something dramatic. Instead, I gave her calm, and calm unnerved her more than shouting ever could. I set the suitcase down with a quiet thud, the sound carrying through the room. My eyes stayed on hers. "If that's what you want," I added, voice steady. Behind me, the clock ticked louder than it should have. The AC hummed. A car door slammed somewhere outside. Inside, no one spoke. My husband cleared his throat but said nothing. My sister-in-law's nails clicked against her phone case. I smiled then, not a happy smile, not even a polite one. It was the kind of smile you use when you've decided on something the other person hasn't figured out yet. The kind that makes people wonder what you know. My mother-in-law shifted her weight, uncomfortable. She masked it quickly, saying, "Good. It'll be easier without the extra stress." Stress. That's what she called me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I reached into my purse and slid my phone out, tapping the screen casually as if checking a text. The glow lit up my face for a moment, enough for me to catch the reflection of confusion in her eyes. She didn't know that my name sat on every booking, the villa, the flights, the car rental, all of it tied to my account. "Don't worry," I said, slipping the phone back into my bag. "You'll figure it out." That sentence landed like a pebble in still water. Ripples of silence spread through the room. My sister-in-law glanced at her mom, confused. My husband finally looked up at me, but too late. I was already walking toward the door. The sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor was deliberate, each step measured. Click, click, click. I wanted them to hear it, to feel the weight of it. "Where are you going?" my husband asked, voice small. I didn't look back. "Home," I said. One word, sharp and final. My mother-in-law laughed, short and brittle. "You always were dramatic." I paused at the door, hand on the knob. The cold metal grounded me, steady in my grip. I turned just enough to meet her eyes one more time. "No," I said softly. "You'll see dramatic soon enough." The room went still. No one dared respond. I opened the door. The night air rushed in, cool and clean, washing over me like a wave. Behind me, the stale lemon-scented room shrank smaller, dimmer, less important. I stepped out, pulling the door shut with a quiet click. The lock caught, and with it, something inside me shifted. Years of biting my tongue, of forcing smiles, of shrinking to fit into a space that never welcomed me, it all cracked open. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the pavement. I wheeled my suitcase behind me, the sound echoing in the night. My phone buzzed again. Another confirmation, another reminder. The villa reservation was mine, the airline seats, mine. Every detail of this trip tied to me, and they had just told me I wasn't invited. I stopped under a streetlight, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through the bookings. My name glowed on every line. My chest rose with something between laughter and disbelief. I tapped the screen, hovered over the cancel button, and felt my pulse steady for the first time all day. Inside that house, they thought I was defeated. Out here, under the cool night sky, I realized I had all the power, and with one touch of my finger, I could decide exactly how this story would play out. Stay with me, because what happened next, what I chose to do with that power, turned their perfect family vacation into a lesson they would never forget. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow of my phone on the nightstand casting blue light across the room. Every booking confirmation sat right there in my inbox. The villa, the flights, even the airport shuttle, all of it tied to me. It was like holding a deck of cards the others didn't even know I had. By morning, I made my choice. I canceled my ticket on their flight. Just mine, leaving theirs untouched. Then, with a few more taps, I adjusted the villa booking. Same dates, same location, but upgraded. A private suite, ocean view, early check-in. Under my name. And just to twist the knife, I added a note to the reservation. The Miller family prefers a chilled bottle of champagne on arrival. When I shut my phone, I felt lighter. For once, I wasn't just reacting to her cruelty. I was steering it. 2 days later, I stood at the airport, hoodie pulled over my head, sunglasses hiding my face. They were there, just a few gates away, juggling bags, checking passports, complaining about security. I watched them from a distance. My mother-in-law was tapping her foot, impatient, as always. My husband carried the family folder, his responsible son act on full display. My sister-in-law scrolled her phone, giggling at something only she found funny. They didn't see me slip past them at the final boarding call. Didn't notice me take a middle seat near the back of the plane, head bowed, pretending to nap. It was almost beautiful, watching them laugh and chat, oblivious to the fact that I was right there, oblivious to what awaited them when we landed. The flight was uneventful. I kept quiet, eyes closed, heart steady, and then we landed in Hawaii. Sunlight poured through the airplane windows, bright and blinding. The whole cabin buzzed with excitement. My family, if I can still call them that, headed straight to baggage claim. I let them go ahead. At the rental counter, the clerk smiled at me. "Reservation for Miller?" he asked. I slid my ID across the desk. He checked, nodded, and handed me the keys. "Your villa is ready, ma'am. Early check-in was approved. Champagne will be waiting in your suite. Champagne, suite. Early check-in. All mine." I wheeled my bag out to the car and drove straight to the villa, the ocean breeze spilling through the open windows. When I arrived, staff welcomed me warmly, carrying my luggage like I was royalty. The suite was breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows, balcony over the water, fresh fruit laid out on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Meanwhile, across town, I knew what was happening. I pictured them arriving at the check-in desk, sweaty from the shuttle, dragging their bags behind them. I pictured the clerk squinting at the reservation, scrolling through the system, and finally shaking his head. "I'm sorry, there's been a change. The booking under that name is no longer valid." I imagined my mother-in-law's face turning red, her voice rising, insisting, demanding, declaring who she was. But none of that mattered. The reservation was in my name, always had been. By the time the sun dipped low over the water, I was sipping champagne on the balcony, waves crashing softly below. My phone buzzed on the table, a dozen missed calls, texts from my husband, from his sister, from her. The messages came rapid fire. "What did you do? They're saying we don't have a room. Fix this now. Answer your phone." I didn't. I poured another glass of champagne instead. The calls turned into voicemails. I could hear her voice even through the muffled recordings. "You embarrassed us. You ruined everything. This was supposed to be Sarah's trip. How could you be so selfish?" Selfish. That word made me laugh out loud. I'd paid for the villa. I'd paid for the flights. And they had told me I wasn't invited. Now they wanted me to swoop in and save them. But I didn't. I stayed silent, letting the sound of the waves drown out their anger. By the next morning, the messages shifted. Less rage, more desperation. "We found a motel, but it's not the same. The kids are upset. Please, just talk to us." I didn't. I took a walk along the beach, the sand warm under my feet, the sky painted pink with sunrise. And for the first time in years, I felt completely free. They wanted me gone. They got their wish, just not the way they imagined. Stay with me, because when we come back, I'll show you what happened when I finally answered one of those calls, and how my silence turned into the loudest confrontation of them all. By the third day, the calls slowed down. The frantic messages turned into silence. No more voicemails demanding I fix things. No more texts accusing me of ruining their vacation. Just quiet. It was almost eerie, like a storm that had finally burned itself out. I sat on the balcony of the villa, coffee warm in my hands, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. The same ocean they were staring at from a cramped motel a few miles away, but for me it felt different, freeing, peaceful, mine. Eventually, I answered one of the calls. My husband's number. His voice cracked through the line, tired, strained. We had to switch places twice already. Mom's furious. Sarah's upset. The kids don't understand. Why did you do this? I let the question hang for a moment. The waves crashed below, steady, grounding me. Then I said softly, "Because you told me I wasn't part of it. Because she made it clear I wasn't welcome. And now, you get to see what that actually feels like." He was quiet for a long time. I could hear muffled voices in the background, his mother's sharp tone cutting through, even from a distance. He finally said, "You've made your point." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. "It's not a point," I told him. "It's a boundary. One I should have drawn years ago." There was nothing else to say. I ended the call and set the phone down. The rest of the week passed in a blur of sunlight and waves. I walked along the beach at sunrise, let the salt air tangle my hair, tasted food that wasn't rushed or criticized. I met strangers who smiled without judgment, who didn't measure my worth against some impossible standard. For once, I wasn't shrinking to fit into a family's shadow. I was just living. When it was time to leave, I packed my suitcase slowly, almost reverently. Each folded shirt, each tucked away souvenir felt like a small victory. Not because I'd won some battle against my mother-in-law, but because I'd stopped fighting for a place that was never meant for me. At the airport, I saw them across the terminal. My mother-in-law's expression was tight, her pearls slightly askew, her posture not as sharp as usual. My sister-in-law sat slumped in a chair, scrolling her phone without a smile. My husband caught sight of me but didn't wave. We boarded the same plane without a word. The silence was louder than any argument we could have had. Back home, life resumed. The laundry piled up. Bills needed paying. The ordinary rhythm of existence took over. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer begging for a seat at their table. If they wanted me gone, fine. I had finally learned how to take myself out on my own terms. Sometimes people ask what happened after. Did my mother-in-law ever apologize? Did the family ever change? The truth is, no, not really. She still finds ways to remind me I'll never measure up in her eyes. But the difference is, I don't bend under it anymore. I don't chase after her approval like it's oxygen. Because that week, in that villa, overlooking the ocean, I realized something important. Belonging doesn't come from being accepted by people who never wanted you. Belonging comes from choosing yourself, even if no one else does. I don't know if my mother-in-law ever realized what she truly lost that day. The chance to have me as part of her family in more than just name. The chance to see her son's wife not as competition but as an ally. The chance to know me beyond her bitterness. But that's not my burden anymore. I closed the door on that trip with the same calm smile I gave her that night in the living room. And in that calm, I found something I'd been missing for years: peace. Maybe she thought she won. Maybe, to her, cutting me out was the ultimate victory. But standing there on that balcony, hearing the waves, feeling the sun on my skin, I knew the truth. She hadn't cut me out. She'd set me free, and I don't think she'll ever realize it.